Welcome back. So, as the 2023 playoffs threaten to see both conference finals end up in a sweep, that would be the first time that has happened in the National Hockey League since the 1992 playoffs. Now, the 91-92 season is one that I remember fondly. Vancouver had their first winning season since 1835. Boston had a decent season, not great, ended up bowing out. We'll talk about them on this board. And more interesting, it was clear that there was a power shift that had taken place. It had been for a while, basically from 1984 through to 1990. We had seen the West win when it came to the Stanley Cup final, minus the 86 final where the Montreal Canadiens won. But things started to shift a little bit, and the Pittsburgh Penguins would continue that shift with a victory. In 92, Montreal would win in 93. We saw the Rangers win in 94, the Devils win in 95. So again, it really felt like the power had shifted towards the East, and this year definitely did something to add to that. But the interesting thing is, if we look at the run here, first off, the preseason betting, if you're looking at preseason odds to win the Stanley Cup, Chicago was tied for second amongst the teams in the NHL at plus 450. The Pittsburgh Penguins were fifth at plus 800, which I'm sure they took a little bit personally because they had won the Stanley Cup the year before. They wanted to prove they could do it again. They had a not great regular season, being sixth overall, but Chicago was eighth overall at 36, 29, and 15. Pittsburgh 39, 32, and 9. But going into those playoffs, there weren't very many people taking either of these teams to necessarily meet each other in the Stanley Cup final. For Chicago, though, they were close, very close to being a contending team. There was some discussion during the Roenick era and Belfour era as well about whether or not these guys were going to win a Stanley Cup and how many they might win because, I mean, they played some good playoff hockey. So I'll start on this side of the board. I'll start with Chicago after getting into the fact that Boston were the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup at plus 400. LA had plus 450 for the Gretzky factor. And Calgary at a plus 500. Calgary having won the Stanley Cup in 1989, not long after that, so they were still favorites. And if you wanted to bet on a long shot that year, the expansion year of the San Jose Sharks, they had a plus 35,000. Yeah, that's a lot. And they had 39 points. They were nowhere near the playoffs. So, yeah, plus 35,000. You could have put in $10 and thought, I'm going to be rich. And then you wouldn't be. But at least you'd only be out $10. So the right playoffs for Chicago, I'll get there, started with a win at home against St. Louis, 3-1. Jocelyn Lemieux had the winner in that one. Some game-winning goals from Jocelyn Lemieux in this run. Then they lost at home against St. Louis 5-3. The winner was scored by Jeff Brown in that one. And then St. Louis puts them down 2-1 in the following game with a 5-4 overtime win. And there's Brett Hull with the winner. Brett Hull, I'm old enough to remember when, teams can't win with Brett Hull in the lineup, and then suddenly they couldn't lose with Brett Hull in the lineup. This was a series that was seen as, maybe a proving ground for St. Louis, and they're up 2-1. However, Chicago would storm back. First, at St. Louis, they win 5-3. Brian Noonan with the winner there. Then they came home and they won 6-4. Chelios had the winner there, and then at St. Louis, they won 2-1. Roenick with the winner in that one. So the 3 games in St. Louis, they won 2 out of 3. The games at home, they won 2 out of 3. They win that series in 6. Now coming over to the East, Pittsburgh's up against the number 2 overall team in Washington. Washington had a stacked team. They lost at Washington in Game 1. John Druce with the winner. John Druce, of course, famous for his playoff play. Then they lost at Washington in Game 2, 6-2, and Michael Pavelka with the winner. So they're down 2-0 going home. They did win Game 3, which is key. 6-4, Mario Lemieux with the winner. You may have heard of him, 66 and all that. And then they lost at home against Washington, 7-2. So, yeah, that didn't look like they were repeating. They were down 3-1. Dmitry Kristich with the winner there. And so it looked like the number 2 overall team in Washington would move on. And that would be the end of that. However, Game 4, Larry Murphy gets the winner in a 5-2 win in Washington. So that's a tough one. They lost at home. Then in Pittsburgh, it's a 6-4 win for the Penguins. Mario Lemieux with the winner. And then they go back to Washington and complete the comeback with a 3-1 win. and Jaromir Jagr with the winner there. And this is when really the 3-1 series comebacks start coming into vogue. But yeah, Mario Lemieux in that series was fantastic. 6 games played out of the 7. 7 goals, 10 assists, 17 points in that first round. Barrasso was 4-3 with an .876 save percentage. So Barrasso would garner a lot of respect after that series. But yeah, coming out of that series, there would have been some questions about Barrasso, although he only allows 1 in the deciding Game 7. So they move on to play the President's Trophy winning New York Rangers. And this is the thing I find interesting too. The trip that Pittsburgh takes to get to the Stanley Cup final isn't dissimilar from what Florida's done thus far in these playoffs. So the President's Trophy winner, well, Pittsburgh wins at New York 4-2 in Game 1. Kevin Stevens with the winner there. But then they lose 4-2 in the next one. Chris King with a winner. And then they come home and they lost 6-5 in overtime. Chris King had the winner there. So they're down 3-1 in the first round. They're down 2-1 in the second round. And I'm sure the discussion at the time would have been, well, you know, Pittsburgh, they've had a pretty good run. They're not down and out yet. But the Rangers, President's Trophy winners, ton of points. I think they had 107 points that year. They're probably going to win this. However, they go to overtime in Game 4 in Pittsburgh, and it is a 5-4 win for the Penguins. Ron Francis with the winner there. And then they go to New York and they win 3-2. Jaromir Jagr with the winner in that one before they came home and closed it out in style. 5-1, Jagr with the winner. So they won 3 in a row there. So the thing to keep in mind is the winning streak, because this was a ridiculous playoffs that it felt like these guys all had tea times. We got to get these series over quickly. And the series against Boston that followed, well, Jagr continues. He gets the winner in Game 1. It's a 4-3 overtime win in Pittsburgh. Then they win 5-2. Tocchet with the winner there. And then they went to Boston and just destroyed them. 5-1 in both games. Kevin Stevens with the win in the first game. Mario Lemieux with the winner in the second game. And so, yeah, that's a 4-game sweep. And then in the Stanley Cup final, well, before we get there, let's go back over to Chicago. At home, or in Detroit. So now, President's Trophy winner, 2nd overall, 9th overall, Boston. But Chicago's playing 3rd overall, Detroit. Detroit getting into that reputation of they don't really do much in the playoffs. This is a really good team, but when are they going to do something in the playoffs? Rangers having that discussion, the 1940 chance, and of course the Capitals. They would be frustrated in the playoffs till 2018. So for Detroit, in Detroit, Chicago wins the first game 2-1. Jocelyn Lemieux with the winner there. And then again in Detroit, they win 3-1. Greg Gilbert with the winner. So in 3 games, they only allow 3 goals. So this is where you've got, you know, Belfour's a pretty decent goaltender. And then at home, I know that's understating it, right? At home against Detroit, they win 5-4, and Dirk Graham with the winner. So crazy game back and forth, but Chicago gets the winner. And then the deciding game, Game 4, it's a 1-0 win. So again, this is early 90s where there's not a lot of low-scoring games, but we have a couple of 1-0 games on the board here. It did happen. Brent Sutter had the winner in that one. So they move on and they play Edmonton. And Edmonton was a team that had proven in 1990, well, you can't take them lightly. The Oilers weren't a top team in 1990, but they won that Stanley Cup. And so 92, it's a matter of can they win it again? The answer was no. And I remember the Game 1. I remember the 8-2 win for Chicago because I was watching that, wearing a Blackhawks jersey at a friend's house, and she was a big Oilers fan. I may have got a real chuckle out of that game. We didn't bet on it. And I kept saying to her, it's a good thing we didn't bet on it. Peluso had the winner in that one, but that 8-2 win was just destruction. And then it's like, okay, how's Edmonton going to answer? Well, they didn't end up allowing 8 goals in a single game again, but Chicago wins 4-2 in Game 2 at home still. Michel Goulet with the winner, and they were down 2-0 in that game. So they were down 2-0, and then they came back and they won it 4-2. Then they go to Edmonton. They win in overtime 4-3. Edmonton, not an easy place to win in the playoffs at that stage. And Roenick had the winner. And then Roenick had the winner in Game 4, where they beat the Oilers 5-1. So it's 5-1 wins in both conference finals to set up the Stanley Cup final between Pittsburgh, who had won 7 in a row coming in, and Chicago, who had won 11 in a row to get to the Stanley Cup final. So Florida right now, as I'm recording this, have won 10 of their last 11. We have seen this kind of thing before. And again, when that playoffs was started, Pittsburgh and Chicago weren't considered really favorites to end up going into the Stanley Cup final. In that final, Pittsburgh wins the first game 5-4. Mario Lemieux had the winner. They were down 4-1 in that game. Chicago up 4-1. Just Pittsburgh storms back and wins it. And then they won at home against Chicago in game 2, 3-1, and it's Mario Lemieux with the winner again because it's a big playoff game. Lemieux's your guy. Then they go to Chicago. They win 1-0, so there's another 1-0 game, and Kevin Stevens had the winner there. And then in game 4 to win the Stanley Cup in Chicago, 6-5 was the final. Ron Francis with the winner. So a ridiculous and wild final game to the round, but in essence, it closed out the playoffs, and it's an 11-game winning streak to close out the playoffs for Pittsburgh, who just decided, all right, enough messing around. It's like after they got down 2-1 against the Rangers, they went, no, let's not do this anymore. Why don't we just stop losing games? That's a great idea. Tocchet had 2 goals and 6 assists in that Stanley Cup final. Barrasso, 4-0, .908 save percentage. So the numbers for the goaltenders, obviously, back then were not exactly where they are now for goaltenders. But I was looking through various sweeps, and there were goaltenders who definitely had .950+ save percentages in series that were sweeps. And for Pittsburgh, they got some really good goaltending from Barrasso throughout. When they needed it, he gave the big save. He's a big game goaltender. And when Barrasso ended up in Pittsburgh, that was a question mark coming out of Buffalo. Can Barrasso be the big game guy? They will doubt a player until they win that championship. And in the case right now of the 2023 playoffs, it looks like it'll either be Vegas or Florida winning their first Stanley Cup, which is different from 92. Pittsburgh won their second Stanley Cup in a row. Chicago was looking for their first Stanley Cup since 1961. So that was 31 years. And of course, they don't get it. They didn't get that Stanley Cup until 2010. So this is why I said out of last night's game with Dallas, where fans are throwing stuff on the ice and they're leaving, while I would be disappointed to be at a game where a team I cheer for is losing like that, you never know when they're going to get back, and you never know how long it's going to take for that to happen. And so just you enjoy the ride. That's the thing I always, tell people, just enjoy the ride, enjoy the wins. And I avoid the really, really big highs and lows, in part because of playoff series that took place back in 98, 92, 95, all the 90s, really. They kind of took it out of me. Late teens, early 20s, and it was like, all right, maybe I won't be so cocky next year about Boston. This was the last time that I was like, okay, Boston's got to get revenge for last year because Pittsburgh took them out, and I think Boston can beat them, and nope, that was the end of that. So that was probably the last year that this guy was kind of like, yeah, no, Boston could win the Stanley Cup. You know what? Nope, I don't, nope. Anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and I think it's remarkable, these playoffs that we're watching, because we don't see this idea of just these winning streaks and these big, huge swings towards one team on one side, one team on the other side in the conferences, and then obviously they're going to collide with one another, and you never know what's going to happen, because again, Chicago looked pretty unstoppable going into that final. They had won 11 in a row, and then Pittsburgh stopped them. Just stopped them dead in their tracks. So we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.